Welcome to the History Maps podcast. You are walking barefoot across the outer courtyard of a temple compound.
And the ground beneath your feet is covered in white sand.
Right, sand that was dredged fresh from the river,
Right.
and it is just baking under the tropical sun.
Which means your feet are very hot.
Exactly. The glare reflecting off that sand is intense. It forces you to squint.
And that is very deliberate. This outer area represents the earthly realm, or, in cosmological terms, even a form of hell.
Yeah, it is a place of heat, of exposure, of suffering.
But then you step over a heavy threshold and into the temple structure itself.
And you're instantly enveloped by massive masonry. The walls are exceptionally thick, the windows are small and narrow.
And the temperature drops dramatically.
The relief is immediate. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the History of Architecture series, focusing specifically on the architecture of Thailand. We have a substantial stack of sources laid out in front of us, ranging from architectural journals to historical analyses.
Yeah, and our mission today is to really decode the physical structures of this region.
Right. And the central thesis we are working with is this. Thai architecture is not merely a collection of aesthetic choices.
Not at all.
It is a highly engineered response to two incredibly powerful forces colliding. On one hand, you have an extreme tropical climate.
Right. Intense heat, suffocating humidity, and torrential flooding.
Exactly. And on the other hand, you have a complex cosmological belief system derived from Theravada Buddhism and Hindu cosmology.
And the compelling aspect of this analysis is how those two forces, the environmental reality and the spiritual ambition, they do not compete with each other.
They synthesize perfectly.
Right. The exact structural solutions required to survive the monsoon season become the very mechanisms used to represent the journey toward enlightenment.
So you are never looking at just a building.
No, you are looking at a machine for living and a map of the universe operating simultaneously.
Let's unpack that sensory experience from the courtyard. We went from the blinding hot sand into a dark, cool interior. It feels like a physical relief, but the sources suggest this is entirely deliberate. The building is physically conditioning you to understand the theology.
It really is. That physical relief is a highly deliberate architectural tool. The builders engineered a thermal transition to reinforce a spiritual transition. By moving from the blistering heat of the sand into the cool sanctuary of the heavy masonry, well, your body experiences the transition from the suffering of the earthly realm to the sanctuary of heaven.
And ancient Thai temples were built as incredibly heavy structures. The sources say we are looking at walls that are sometimes 60 to 100 meters thick in certain ancient designs.
Yeah, the sheer scale is massive.
60 to 100 meters. That requires an explanation. How does a wall that thick function in a tropical climate?
Well, it functions through thermal mass. Dense materials like stone or thick brick, they absorb heat very slowly.
Okay.
So during the intense heat of the day, the exterior of the masonry absorbs the solar radiation, but the wall is so thick that the heat never penetrates to the interior sanctuary.
So the inside stays completely cool?
Exactly. Then at night, when the ambient air temperature drops, that massive wall just radiates the stored heat back out into the night sky.
Oh, I see.
It is a completely passive cooling mechanism that serves a deeply theological purpose. The temple provides literal, physical sanctuary from the harshness of the world.
Which brings us to the concept of the mandala layout and Mount Meru. The sources frequently mention the concept of Tribhumi.
Right, the three worlds.
Yeah, the three worlds. So if you are a practitioner walking into this space, how does an entire temple compound function as a physical map of the universe?
To understand the spatial organization of a traditional temple compound, or what, we really have to look at the mandala layout.
Okay.
This is a geometric, highly symmetrical arrangement. It is centered on a principal shrine and surrounded by concentric zones of subordinate structures.
And this ties into the Tribhumi cosmology.
It does. Tribhumi maps out the realms of desire, form, and formlessness. And in this system, the universe revolves around Mount Meru.
The cosmic mountain.
Right, the cosmic mountain where the deities reside. The central structure of the temple compound always represents this cosmic center.
So if you are trying to picture this mandala layout, you can think of a massive target on the ground. You are standing on the outermost ring, the secular world, and the bullseye in the very center is Mount Meru.
Precisely. And surrounding that central peak, you have concentric seas.
The Sedentary oceans.
Yes, and concentric mountain ranges, the Sadaborifin. They extend outward horizontally from the center.
And there is a vertical element too, right?
Very much so. Vertically, the hierarchy continues. Above Mount Meru, you have an odd number of celestial heavens extending upward.
And below.
Below, you have the subterranean levels of the underworld. So when a worshiper navigates the courtyards, stepping over raised thresholds and passing through walled enclosures, they are symbolically traversing those cosmic oceans and mountain ranges.
Moving from the profane edges of the universe toward the sacred center. Let's get very practical for a moment. If you are navigating one of these sprawling complexes, what are you actually looking at? The sources divide a typical Wat into two main zones.
Right, the Futhawat and the Sankawat.
Exactly. How do these two areas function in the daily reality of the compound?
Well, the distinction is entirely based on function and daily life. The Futhawat is the sacred zone.
Okay.
This is the area dedicated entirely to religious practice. It houses the ordination hall, the assembly halls, and the reliquary structures.
And the Sankawat?
The Sankawat, on the other hand, is the residential zone. This is where the monks live.
Because monks have to live in the physical world, so they need practical spaces.
Right, they need infrastructure.
Yeah.
The Sankawat contains their living quarters, communal dining areas, and study spaces.
What does a typical day look like in that zone?
A monk's day begins before dawn with meditation and chanting. Then there is the alms round in the surrounding community. And then they have hours of study, temple maintenance, and instruction. And the architecture actually reflects this division.
How so?
The Sankawat is often simpler. It was historically built from perishable materials like wood in earlier eras.
While the Futhawat was built from durable stone or brick to last for eternity.
Exactly. Both zones are usually enclosed within the same outer wall to demarcate the temple from the secular town, but they serve very different day-to-day purposes.
That brings up a practical question for someone standing in the Futhawat, the sacred courtyard.
Sure.
I am looking at photos from these sources, and I see two heavily decorated rectangular halls that look remarkably similar.
Yes.
One is the Ubasat, the ordination hall, and one is the Viharn, the assembly hall. If I do not have a map, how do I know which is which?
The key identifier is hidden in plain sight. You want to look for the Sema stones.
Sema stones.
Yeah. The Ubasat is the most sacred building in the entire compound. It is the specific site where new monks are ordained into the monastic order.
Okay, so it has a very specific ritual function.
Right. And the rituals performed here require an absolutely pure, demarcated space. So to designate this consecrated ground, the builders surround the Ubosat with 8 boundary markers, known as Sema stones.
Why specifically 8?
They correspond to the cardinal and intercardinal points of the compass.
So north, south, east, west, and the spaces between them.
Exactly. And sometimes there is actually a 9th stone buried directly beneath the center of the hall.
Oh, I see.
These stones can be buried deep in the ground, marked only by small stone leaves on the surface, or set upon elaborate pedestals. But if you see those 8 boundary stones surrounding a hall, you are definitely looking at the Ubosat.
And the Viharn lacks these boundary stones.
Yes, the Viharn is a public assembly hall.
So it is less restricted.
Very much so. It is where monks gather for their daily chanting and where lay worshippers come to pray, listen to sermons, and make offerings.
Okay, that makes sense.
A temple might have multiple Viharns built over several centuries to accommodate a growing local community, but there's usually only one Ubosat, rigidly defined by its Sema stones.
It is a clear architectural label if you know the visual vocabulary.
Definitely.
Let's move from the halls to the vertical structures, starting with the Chedi. The sources trace the Chedi all the way back to the Mauryan Empire under Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BCE.
It is an incredibly long lineage for a building style.
Yeah.
The Chedi, or stupa, is the most ancient structural form in the Buddhist architectural tradition. Emperor Ashoka, who ruled over much of the Indian subcontinent, is credited by tradition with constructing 84,000 stupas.
84,000.
That is the traditional number, yes, built to enshrine the relics of the historical Buddha. And the original form was essentially a massive hemispherical burial mound made of earth and brick.
Representing Mount Meru again.
Right, symbolizing Mount Meru and the dome of the heavens.
And over centuries, this architectural form travels.
It does. Through maritime trade networks and the movement of monks across the Bay of Bengal, the stupa form spread to Southeast Asia.
And how did it change once it reached Thailand?
In Thailand, it evolved significantly from that early, heavy mound into a much more refined, bell-shaped reliquary tower.
These chidis contain relics, right? Fragments of bone from the Buddha, ashes of revered teachers, or remains of royalty.
Yes.
And the architecture dictates a specific physical interaction here. Worshippers perform circumambulation, walking clockwise around the chidi.
They do.
Why clockwise?
Walking clockwise ensures that your right side is facing the sacred object. In many ancient Asian cultures, the right side is considered pure and respectful, while the left side is associated with mundane or impure tasks.
Oh, interesting.
By circumambulating in this manner, usually 3 times to honor the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the worshiper physically enacts a cycle of reverence.
I also noticed the sources mention the extensive use of gold leaf on these structures. It is not just decorative paint.
No, it is actual gold.
Right, applied by worshippers. For listeners who might not be familiar with this practice, we are talking about merit making, correct?
Yes.
Essentially, spiritual currency.
Merit making is a foundational concept in Theravada Buddhism. You perform a virtuous deed to accumulate positive karma, which impacts your current life and future rebirths.
Okay.
Purchasing small squares of gold leaf and pressing them onto a chedi or a Buddha statue is a deeply personal act of merit-making.
So the building physically changes over time because of the worshippers.
Exactly. Architecturally, the gilding is highly symbolic. The gold leaf catches the tropical sunlight. It creates a luminous quality that evokes the radiance and purity of Buddhist teachings.
It transforms a static brick structure into an evolving, glowing testament to the community's devotion.
It really does.
Okay, so I'm looking at the layout, and right next to these smooth, bell-shaped chedis, there are sometimes these massive, jagged, angular towers. They look almost towering corn cobs made of stone, and they look like they belong to a completely different cultural tradition. What are those?
Those are the prangs. And you are correct to notice the aesthetic clash, because the prang is derived from the Khmer tradition.
Originating in what is now Cambodia.
Exactly. Where the chedi is rounded and bell-like, the prang is a tall, angular tower made of heavily carved stone or brick. It is dramatically vertical.
The sources mention they are built using corbelled stone. We should explain how corbelling actually works, because this is before modern steel beams or true load-bearing arches in this region.
Corbelling is a fascinating feat of physics. Instead of creating a true arch with a keystone that distributes weight outward, corbelling involves stacking flat stones or bricks.
Right.
But with each successive layer projecting slightly further inward than the one beneath it.
So you just keep stepping the stones closer and closer together until they eventually meet at the top?
Precisely. However, this method requires massive counterweight.
To keep it from falling in.
Right. To keep those inward-leaning stones from collapsing under their own weight, the walls themselves must be incredibly thick and heavy to anchor the structure.
That explains the visual bulk.
Yes. This is why a prang looks so massive on the outside, yet the interior chamber, the actual usable space, is surprisingly narrow and small. The engineering dictates the form.
So the prang serves as the dominant vertical element in certain eras of Thai architecture.
It does. It specifically represents the cosmic peak of Mount Meru, but utilizing a much heavier, more imposing structural vocabulary than the chedi.
Aside from these massive reliquary towers and assembly halls, there are also smaller, highly specialized structures in the compound, like the ho tray and the mandap.
The ho tray is the scripture library, and the engineering here is entirely defensive.
Because it was designed to house the Buddhist canon known as the Tipitaka.
Exactly. And historically, these texts were meticulously inscribed onto dried palm leaves.
Palm leaves in a tropical, humid environment filled with insects sounds like a preservation nightmare.
It is the ultimate challenge for archivists. Palm leaves are highly vulnerable to humidity, mold, and particularly termites.
So how did they protect them?
To protect them, the builders utilized isolation tactics. The ho tray is often raised on a high masonry platform or, more ingeniously, built on wooden stilts directly over a pond or moat.
Wait, a moat for a library?
Yes. The water acts as an impenetrable natural barrier against termites and crawling insects.
That is brilliant.
And the dry, elevated wooden structure ensures cross breeze to mitigate mold. It is environmental engineering deployed to protect information.
What about the mandap?
The mandap serves a different purpose. It is a square, multi-tiered structure used to enshrine specific sacred objects.
Like what?
Well, often things like a replica of the Buddha's footprint. And because these footprints are deeply venerated, the mandap often displays some of the finest, most intricate decorative craftsmanship in the entire compound.
Speaking of craftsmanship, we need to talk about the architectural motifs.
Sure.
The silhouettes of Thai temple roofs are instantly recognizable globally, largely due to the chofas. These are the horn-like pieces at the edges of the roofs.
Yes, the chofas, which translates roughly to sky tassels.
Okay.
They are the elegant, curving finials that sit at the very apex of the tiered roofs. They often resemble stylized bird beaks or horns.
And what do they represent?
In the broader symbolic language, they represent the mythical bird Garuda.
The half-bird, half-human creature.
Exactly. Garuda serves as the mount of the Hindu god Vishnu and was integrated into Buddhist cosmology as a protector.
Placing the Garuda at the highest point of the roof makes sense. It symbolizes the sky, divine guardianship, and the transcendence of earthly bounds.
It visually lifts these heavy structures up toward the heavens.
It serves to ward off malevolent forces while harmonizing the heavy building with the sky, and it pairs directly with another crucial motif found lower to the ground.
Right, the Naga balustrades.
Yeah. You see these multi-headed serpent motifs lining the staircases leading up to the temple entrances. I like to think of them as cosmic escalators taking you from the mundane dirt up into this sacred space.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. The Naga represents the cosmic serpent that encircles the world.
And in agrarian societies heavily dependent on the monsoon, I imagine the serpent is deeply tied to water.
Very much so. It is tied to water, rain, rivers, and agricultural fertility.
So, by placing the Naga along the stairways, what is the architecture defining?
It defines the bridge between the earthly realm and the divine elevated platform. The coiled bodies form protective railings, offering symbolic protection against natural calamities.
So you have the Naga on the stairs representing water and earth.
Yes.
And the Garuda on the roof representing the sky.
Exactly. When you pair them together, the architecture illustrates a harmonious balance of opposing natural forces. The entire building is a suspended equilibrium between the earth and the heavens.
So we have this perfect, harmonious cosmological map. The design is intentional down to the placement of every single stone.
It really is.
But the physical reality on the ground in Southeast Asia over the last 1,000 years was incredibly chaotic. Empires were constantly rising, falling, expanding, and invading each other.
Oh, absolutely.
How did that perfect spiritual map survive the violent reality of actual history? Let's look at the physical bricks and trace how these kingdoms evolved.
To understand the physical evolution of Thai architecture, we have to trace the historical timeline.
Starting with the Dvaravati era.
Right, which spanned from the 6th to the 11th century. This foundational tradition was shaped primarily by the Mon people in the central plains of present-day Thailand, mostly in riverine settlements.
The sources described Dvaravati architecture as utilizing clay bricks and a material called laterite. What exactly is laterite? It sounds like a stone, but the text referred to it almost like soil.
It is essentially both, which is what makes it such a vital foundational material.
Okay.
Laterite is a soil type extremely rich in iron and aluminum. It forms in tropical areas with alternating wet and dry seasons.
So when it is in the ground?
When it is in the ground, it is relatively soft and holds moisture. You can literally cut it out of the earth with a spade, almost like cutting blocks of dense clay.
Okay, but you cannot build a durable temple out of soft clay that will just dissolve in the next monsoon.
And that is the genius of laterite. Once you cut it into blocks and expose it to the air and the sun, the iron oxidizes.
It hardens.
It hardens into an incredibly dense, highly porous rock. It becomes practically indestructible and is highly resistant to weathering.
Wow.
This is why we still see Dvaravati laterite foundations standing today, over a millennium later.
The Dvaravati builders favored modest structures, right?
Yes.
We see simple, bell-shaped stupas with tiered bases, drawing heavy influence from Indian forms and Sri Lankan Theravada traditions.
In the defining visual motif of this era was the Dharma Chakra, or the Wheel of the Law, which appeared frequently in massive stone carvings.
They prioritized accessible religious symbolism over overwhelming monumental grandeur.
They did. The Dvaravati culture also introduced open-sided pavilions, or viharas, derived from the Pew city-states located in present-day Myanmar.
The Pew civilization utilized rectangular brick enclosures with pillared halls for communal worship. How did the Mon adapt that?
The Mon adapted this by creating viharas with semicircular ground plans.
Why semicircular?
Because it visually evoked the sheltering, overarching form of the Bodhi tree.
The tree under which the Buddha attained enlightenment?
Exactly. These halls were constructed from interlocking bricks laid without mortar.
Really? No mortar at all?
None. They relied entirely on the weight and friction of the masonry, and they featured beautiful stucco images of the Buddha. They were simple, highly functional spaces that embedded Indian monastic prototypes right into the moated cities of central Thailand.
But then the geopolitical landscape shifts.
It does.
From the 11th to the 13th century, the Khmer Empire expands its massive influence westward into the Central Plains and the northeastern region of Thailand. And suddenly, the architecture shifts drastically towards aggressive verticality.
This brings us to the Lopburi style, heavily defined by Khmer influence.
Right.
The Khmer Empire introduced the prang, that tall, core-built tower we discussed earlier, but they also brought a preference for sandstone, in addition to laterite.
And they began building massive temple mountains.
Yes, temple mountains that emulated Mount Meru as a towering, multi-tiered pyramid.
You can see this influence directly from structures like Angkor Wat in Cambodia.
Exactly. This concept permeated northeastern Thailand, an area known as Isan, which was under heavy Khmer dominion.
Sites like Phi Mai parallel the verticality and symbolic hierarchy of Angkor.
They do. They used heavy brick, laterite, and carved sandstone to elevate divine imagery far above the earthly plane.
So the Khmer period completely transformed the regional architectural vocabulary.
It introduced a heavy, monumental stone tradition designed to project imperial power as much as theological devotion.
The empire eventually recedes, and we move into the 13th to 14th century, the era of the Sukhothai kingdom.
Right.
The sources universally describe this as a golden age of stylistic refinement.
Sukhothai architecture represents a deliberate, conscious shift away from the heavy, blocky, imposing Khmer structures.
They move towards something much more elegant.
Elegant, slender, and distinctly Thai. This is the era that birthed the iconic lotus bud chedi.
Lotus bud chedi.
Yeah, instead of a simple bell shape or a heavy tower, the very top of the stupa is sculpted to resemble an unfurling lotus bud.
The lotus is everywhere in Buddhist symbolism. It grows out of the mud but blooms perfectly clean above the water.
Precisely. It symbolizes purity, rebirth, and the blooming of spiritual wisdom from the muck of earthly attachment. The architecture was actively attempting to look weightless.
The roofs also underwent a major change during this time, right?
Yes, Sukhothai builders introduced open pavilions with graceful, sweeping, curved roofs.
And what was the purpose of the curvature?
The curvature was designed to soften the heavy masonry and symbolize the impermanence of the physical world. It is a much lighter, more aerated and refined aesthetic compared to the heavy stone monuments of the preceding Khmer centuries.
Which leads us to the Ayutthaya period, spanning a massive chunk of time from the 14th to the 18th century.
It was a very long era.
What stands out to me here isn't just the style, but the profound environmental engineering. Ayutthaya is described in the sources as a hydrous city. What does it actually mean to build a city on water?
Ayutthaya was a marvel of urban engineering. It was built at the confluence of three major rivers.
The Chafraya, the Lopburi, and the Pasak.
Right. This made it an island city, heavily defined by water, tidal flows, and seasonal monsoon flooding.
So the architecture had to completely adapt to this hydrous reality.
They could not fight the water, they had to integrate it.
So how do you build massive temples in a floodplain?
You build a network of canals. Ayutthaya was crisscrossed by an extensive grid of artificial canals that functioned as the primary streets.
Okay.
Temples were deliberately oriented around these waterways, and the foundations for these heavy brick structures had to be driven deep into the soft, muddy earth.
How did they do that?
By using thousands of wooden piles to prevent the buildings from sinking.
The water dictated the entire layout of society.
It dictated transportation, commerce, and sanitation. The rivers and canals were the main arteries.
Even the markets.
Yeah, markets were literally floating on the water. Houses for the common people were built on stilts or on bamboo rafts tethered to the banks, rising and falling with the tide.
It was also an era of immense opulence.
Ayutthaya became one of the largest and wealthiest cities in the world, thriving on international trade, connecting Asia to Europe.
And that staggering wealth was reflected in the architecture.
Oh, absolutely. They built massive soaring shadis, deeply fortified brick temple walls, and elaborate roofs with intricate flame-like finials.
So they were combining styles.
They incorporated the graceful curved lines of Sukhothai, the vertical imposing prangs of the Khmer, and Lanna influences from the northern kingdom.
Synthesizing all of them.
Right, into a grand imposing style meant to project absolute, unassailable power.
But it wasn't unassailable. Ayutthaya was entirely destroyed, burned to the ground in 1767 during a massive war with the Burmese.
It was a total collapse.
That total destruction forces a massive geographic and architectural shift, leading us to the Ratanakosin era, from the late 18th to the 20th century.
Right. In 1782, King Rama I relocated the capital further south, across the Chao Phraya River to the site of modern-day Bangkok.
And what was the goal of this new city?
The explicit, stated goal of the new dynasty was to reconstruct the glory of the fallen capital. The new city was built as a deliberate architectural mirror of Ayutthaya to establish historical continuity and political legitimacy.
They even excavated a massive canal-based urban plan, known as Krungthip, to mimic the old island city.
The canal network formed a fortified island core, known as Ratanakosin Island. These canals served as the primary arteries for defense, transport, and commerce.
Essentially recreating the amphibious urban fabric of Ayutthaya.
Yes, this facilitated the familiar floating markets and riverine settlements, ensuring the new capital functioned environmentally and economically, just like the old one.
The crown jewels of this new era are the Grand Palace and Wat Phra Kaeo, the Temple of the Emerald Buddha.
Beautiful structures.
Looking at the sources, the level of ornamentation here seems almost dizzying compared to the earlier brick ruins.
The Ratanakosin style embraces highly reflective, intensely opulent interiors and exteriors to symbolize divine kingship. The goal was to overwhelm the viewer.
And you really see that at Wat Phra Kaeo.
You see structures adorned from base to spire with green mirrored tiles, glass mosaics, and inlaid gold medallions depicting intricate Buddhist motifs.
It must have been blinding in the tropical sun.
It was designed to dazzle. The roofs are multi-tiered, cascading downward with ornate gables and towering cruciform spires.
It is architecture as a projection of supreme authority.
Right, reinforcing the divine right of the newly established Chakri dynasty.
We also see a very notable evolution in the temple murals during this time, moving away from strict theology.
In the early Ratanakosin period, temple murals were strictly cosmological, illustrating the Trophim framework.
The maps of Mount Meru, the heavens and the hells.
Yes. But by the mid-19th century, under the reigns of King Rama III and King Rama IV, a new style emerged, heavily influenced by an artist-monk named Krua in Kong.
The Kong style, what changed?
The murals shifted drastically toward secular and royal narratives. They began depicting actual historical events, royal achievements, daily life.
Even bringing in outside artistic ideas.
Exactly. Incorporating early, linear perspective techniques influenced by Western art.
So the temple walls became a canvas for political propaganda and historical record-keeping, rather than just purely theological maps.
The architecture was beginning to document the modern world.
Okay, we have spent a lot of time unpacking the monumental architecture of kings, empires, and deities. We have seen how the elites built heavily fortified, deeply symbolic stone and brick structures. But how did the average person survive?
Right, everyday life.
The kings had massive thermal mass walls to keep cool. The average farmer did not. How did everyday people survive the tropical heat, the crushing humidity, and the monsoon floods?
This brings us to the vernacular engineering of the traditional Thai house, known as the Ruan Thai.
The Ruan Thai.
The Ruan Thai is a masterclass in environmental engineering and resourcefulness. Unlike the heavy masonry of the temples, which relies on thermal mass to block heat, the traditional house relies on lightweight materials and passive airflow to shed heat continuously.
What is the most common feature of these houses?
The most universal, non-negotiable characteristic of the Ruan Thai is that the living quarters are elevated on sturdy wooden or bamboo stilts.
The sources specify that the floor is raised 1 to 3 meters above the ground. What is the specific utility of elevating the entire house? It requires significantly more structural work.
It serves 3 critical survival functions. First, flood protection.
As we discussed with Ayutthaya, Thai settlements are traditionally centered around rivers and canals.
That flood predictably every single monsoon season. Elevating the house ensures the living quarters remain dry even when the river bursts its banks.
And the second function?
Defense against wildlife. The tropical environment is home to venomous snakes, rodents, and wild animals. The smooth stilts create a physical barrier.
And the third function?
Daily thermal comfort. It allows for constant natural ventilation.
How does that work?
By elevating the structure, prevailing winds flow completely under and around the living space. The floorboards are often spaced slightly apart.
Creating a draft.
Yes, a constant cooling draft that pulls air up from the shaded ground into the humid environment of the house.
It also creates a highly functional multi-purpose space underneath the house. You aren't just losing that square footage.
Exactly. The ground area beneath the stilts is deeply shaded by the house above. During the hot, oppressive daytime hours, the interior of the house might still be warm, but that shaded underbelly serves as an open, cool workspace.
So families use it for weaving, crafting, tool repair, or socializing.
At night, it provides fenced shelter for livestock, And during the peak flood season, it becomes a literal dock to more small boats.
The vernacular architecture utilizes every vertical inch of space.
It does.
Then you look up at the roofs, and they are incredibly striking. They aren't flat. They are steeply pitched, towering gabled roofs with very long, extended overhangs.
The steep pitch serves a dual purpose, addressing both water and heat. From a moisture standpoint, a steep angle sheds heavy torrential monsoon rainwater rapidly.
Preventing accumulation that could easily rot the thatch or timber roofing materials.
Right. And from a thermal standpoint, the high pitch is the engine of the house's cooling system. It creates thermal stratification.
Let's break down that thermal stratification because that is the hidden physics of the structure.
Hot air naturally rises due to convection. In a structure with a flat, low ceiling, that hot air gets trapped right at the level where people are breathing, sitting, and sleeping.
Which is miserable in the tropics.
Exactly. By designing a steeply pitched roof, the Ruan Thai creates a massive volume of empty space high above the floor.
It functions like a chimney.
Precisely. The hot air rises up into that high pitch, far away from the occupants. As it rises, it draws cooler air in through the windows and up to the gaps in the floorboards to replace it.
So the lower living area where the family actually stays remains significantly cooler.
Yes. Furthermore, the long roof overhangs act like a giant umbrella, protecting the walls and open windows from direct, glaring sunlight and driving angled rain.
Allowing windows to remain open even during a storm. When you look at the layout of the living quarters themselves, it is heavily partitioned based on function.
The layout usually features an open central hall or a large raised veranda that connects separate enclosed rooms.
Okay.
This open space occupies a large percentage of the total floor area. It serves as the communal living space for the extended family to gather, eat, and sleep during hot nights.
And the kitchen.
Crucially, the kitchen is situated at the rear of the house, often slightly separated from the main structure by a small walkway.
That makes perfect sense. It's the modern equivalent of someone microwaving fish in an open-plan office. You do not want that near your desk. You don't want a fire inside a wooden house, and you certainly don't want extra heat in a tropical climate.
Exactly. The separation isolates the heat of the cooking fires, the smoke, and the strong odors from the main living and sleeping areas. It is purely functional zoning.
The sources also point out that while the fundamental principles, elevation, steep roofs, cross-ventilation, are consistent everywhere, there are distinct regional variations based on local microclimates. The Ruan Thai is not a monolith.
It adapts perfectly to its specific geography. In the north, among the Thai Yuan communities, the climate is slightly cooler and mountainous with less intense rainfall.
So how does the house change there?
Here you see massive teak longhouses that accommodate multiple related families. Because the rain is less violent, the roof pitches are noticeably lower than in the Central Plains.
And the windows?
The windows are smaller to retain some warmth during the cooler winter nights.
In the central region, along the massive flood plains of the Chao Phraya Basin, the adaptations shift to deal with water.
Right. In the Central Plains, the stilts are much higher, sometimes over 3 meters, to account for deep, prolonged floodwaters.
In the verandas.
The houses feature very broad, expansive verandas to foster community interaction above the waterline.
Moving to the northeast, the Isen region has a much drier, harsher climate.
The stilts are often lower there, and the houses sometimes take on temporary forms.
Built quickly for the harvest.
Yes, built with bamboo for the harvest season, and then dismantled, or they adopt a permanent twin house layout.
And down in the deep south,
the southern peninsula experiences the most extreme, prolonged rainfall of the entire country.
So how do they handle that?
To handle this, southern builders developed unique concave roofs, curving inward slightly. They are engineered to channel and shed immense volumes of water incredibly rapidly to prevent roof collapse.
This raises a really fascinating paradox.
What is that?
If these traditional designs were so perfectly adapted to the climate using thermal stratification, elevation, and brilliant cross-ventilation, why are modern Thai houses and neighborhoods so heavily dependent on energy-intensive air conditioning?
That is the modern ventilation dilemma. The research highlighted in the sources, particularly a notable study out of Purdue University, addresses this directly.
What did the study find?
This shift occurred when modern construction began adopting Western building materials and Western aesthetic forms without adapting them to the harsh realities of the tropical climate.
We are talking about materials like concrete and brick replacing lightweight wood and bamboo.
Exactly. Traditional houses use lightweight materials like bamboo, thatch, and thin timber. These materials do not retain heat. Modern houses use concrete, cinder blocks, and brick, which have very high thermal mass.
Think of concrete as a massive thermal battery. All day long, the tropical sun is charging that concrete battery with heat.
It is a perfect analogy. The concrete walls absorb the intense solar radiation all day. Then at sunset, when the outside air finally cools down and you want to open your windows, that concrete battery starts discharging.
It's just pushing heat into the house.
It slowly radiates all that stored heat directly into the interior of the house for the next 6 to 8 hours. It essentially bakes the occupants during the night.
And what about the roofs?
Furthermore, modern designs often eliminate the long protective roof overhangs to save space or look more modern, allowing direct sunlight to penetrate glass windows and turn the interior spaces into greenhouses.
So the modern house acts as a heat trap, whereas the traditional house was designed to constantly shed it. But the Purdue study notes that natural ventilation isn't entirely obsolete, even in modern concrete builds.
It isn't. They found that natural ventilation can still provide thermal comfort for roughly 20% of the year.
Primarily during the cooler winter months from November to February.
The study sought to bridge this gap. They developed a set of recommendations to integrate the passive cooling logic of the ancient Ruan Thai into modern concrete construction.
What did they recommend?
To optimize a modern house for both air conditioning in the hot months and natural ventilation in the cool months, the researchers recommended a 2.5-story design.
Just like the traditional stilt house, they recommend the first floor should be elevated or left largely open to create a wind scoop effect and protect against urban flooding.
The study also relies heavily on fluid dynamics. It recommends designing the house with larger inlet windows on the windward side and smaller outlet windows on the leeward side.
Utilizing the Venturi effect.
Exactly. This utilizes the Venturi effect to increase the velocity of the air as it moves through the structure, creating a stronger cooling breeze.
Are there recommendations for window placement?
Yes. Additionally, it advises avoiding windows on the east and west walls entirely to prevent direct solar heat gain during sunrise and sunset.
Keeping the interior space as open as possible to allow the wind to travel freely.
Marrying modern structural integrity with ancient fluid dynamics.
That perfectly sets up our final discussion, because Thai architecture was never isolated in a vacuum. It didn't just look inward at its own climate, it actively absorbed and adapted global influences over centuries.
The geographic location of Thailand placed it precisely at the crossroads of major maritime and overland trade routes,
ensuring a constant, centuries-long influx of foreign ideas, materials, and skilled craftsmen.
Let's start with the Chinese and Burmese contributions. The sources point specifically to the 19th and early 20th century architecture in Bangkok's Yaowarat district.
Yaowarat was profoundly shaped by massive waves of Chinese migration and trade.
Chinese merchants established clan houses and vast networks of commercial shophouses.
These structures are defined by distinct southern Chinese Hokkien styles, right?
Specifically the upturned eaves, curved tile roofs, and intricate wooden carvings around the windows and doors.
And these shophouses were highly functional for an urban economy.
They were dual-purpose engines of commerce. The ground floors served as commercial trading spaces, opening directly onto the street with folding wooden doors to display goods.
While the upper floors were entirely residential for the extended family.
This dense, multi-level design facilitated the booming port economy of Siam and created a vibrant urban fabric.
This Chinese influence reached the highest levels of the royal court as well. King Rama III actively incorporated Chinese architectural styles into his royal temple commissions.
During his reign, trade with China was exceptionally lucrative, and Chinese aesthetics were considered highly fashionable and auspicious. We see the introduction of the Keng, which are Chinese-style buildings or shrines, integrated into Thai temple compounds.
They also started using porcelain, didn't they?
The court also began heavily utilizing painted porcelain tiles, breaking up imported Chinese ceramics to create intricate floral mosaics on the facades of stupas and viharns.
Blending traditional Thai structural forms with Chinese decorative brilliance.
Exactly.
If we look away from the capital and up to the mountainous north, we see a heavy Burmese influence.
Following the Burmese-Siamese Wars of the 18th century, migrations of artisans brought advanced teak craftsmanship into the northern regions.
Particularly the Lanna Kingdom.
Yes, northern temples began adopting Burmese multi-roofed assembly halls. These featured highly complex tiered overlapping roofs built on massive teak frames.
The sources mention that this layering isn't just aesthetic, it symbolizes the layered heavens in Buddhist cosmology.
Yes. The cascading roofs draw the eye upward through the celestial realms. And the craftsmanship was incredibly durable.
How so?
Burmese artisans utilized complex interlocking joinery techniques, wood fitted into wood without iron nails.
Wow.
That significantly enhanced the seismic resilience of the buildings in the hilly, earthquake-prone northern terrain.
And they used stucco, too.
Furthermore, they introduced the widespread use of luminous white stucco applied over brick cores for the stupas,
Creating a stark, ethereal contrast against the dark, heavy teak wood and gilded roofs.
a protective and striking aesthetic derived directly from the temples of the Bagan era in Myanmar.
Then, in the 19th century, the global political landscape shifts dramatically. European imperialism is aggressively pressing in on all sides of Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
The British are in Burma and Malaya. The French are in Indochina. And the Thai monarchy, specifically Kings Rama, the 4th, 5th, and 6th, begin using architecture as a geopolitical tool.
This is a crucial pivot in the history of the region. The adoption of Western neoclassical architecture in Bangkok was not the result of colonization, as Siam famously remained uncolonized.
Instead, it was a deliberate, strategic projection of modernity, civilization, and sovereignty.
By commissioning grand state buildings in the European style, the Siamese kings were signaling to Western powers that Siam was a modern nation-state on equal footing with the empires of the West.
Wait, hang on. I have to challenge this because it seems like a massive paradox. If the whole point is to prove to the British and the French that Siam is an independent, sovereign nation with its own rich, ancient culture, why would you build a replica of an Italian palace? Doesn't adopting their architecture just make you look like you've already been culturally colonized?
It's a brilliant geopolitical chess move. You have to understand the 19th century European mindset.
Okay.
The colonial powers justified their expansions through the concept of the civilizing mission.
Right.
They claimed they had a duty to colonize nations that lacked modern administration, infrastructure, and civilized architecture.
So by preemptively building European-style infrastructure, railways, and neoclassical palaces, the Siamese monarchy neutralized that specific justification.
They were speaking the visual language of power that the Europeans respected. It was a defensive modernization.
The most prominent example in the sources is the Anantasamakam Throne Hall, initiated in 1908 and completed in 1915.
King Rama V commissioned a team of Italian architects and engineers to design this massive structure.
And it is very classical.
It is a masterpiece of Italian Renaissance design, featuring a massive central copper dome, soaring Corinthian columns, and imported white Carrara marble. Visually, it echoes the classical palaces of Rome or Paris.
However, it was quietly adapted for the local environment.
The foundations had to be elevated, and complex piling systems were used to protect the heavy marble structure from the swampy soil and tropical flooding.
The monarchy was merging Western aesthetic precision with Thai environmental realities.
This fusion of Western design and local climate adaptation brings us to a really fascinating micro-style: the Lanna Colonial gingerbread house.
Tell us about that.
During the peak of the global teakwood trade era in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Western logging companies established massive operations in northern cities like Chiang Mai.
This brought a sudden influx of European managers and officials who wanted to live in familiar Western-style homes.
But they had no European builders. They had to rely entirely on local Lanna craftsmen and local materials to construct them.
The result is this beautiful hybrid, half-wood, half-concrete residences.
They are colloquially referred to as gingerbread houses because of the incredibly intricate, meticulously carved wooden fretwork that adorns the eaves, the window frames, and the door archways.
We have a specific case study mentioned in the sources: the Ping Nakara Boutique Hotel in Chiang Mai.
Ping Nakara is a modern structure that was meticulously built to encapsulate the architectural essence of that Lanna Colonial era.
It incorporates various roof styles from the period,
including the Ruan Manila, which features a flat gable roof, and the Panya style, which has a sloped, hipped roof.
What I find brilliant about this style is that the intricate fretwork isn't just decorative gingerbread pasted on for looks. It serves a vital physical function.
Exactly. The carved wooden fretwork panels placed above the high-arched windows and doors are completely open to the air.
They act as beautiful, ornate ventilation grills.
They allow for continuous truss ventilation, drawing fresh air into the high-ceilinged rooms, while the wide verandas provide deep shade for the walls.
It successfully marries the aesthetic traditions of a century ago, the terracotta tiles, the long-shaded balconies, the ornate carving, with the structural requirements of comfort in a hot climate.
The fretwork acts as a passive cooling vent disguised as art.
We have traced an incredible journey today. From the heavy, heat-absorbing masonry walls of cosmological temples designed to simulate heaven, through the lightweight, wind-catching genius of the Ruan Thai stilt houses, to the geopolitical stone monuments of a defensive monarchy, and finally to the beautifully ventilated hybrids of the colonial teak era.
The consistent, undeniable through line is adaptation. Whether the challenge facing the builders was an oppressive flooded climate, a complex theological map that needed physical form, or the existential threat of foreign imperialism, the architecture adapted to solve the problem.
Which leaves us with a final concept to mull over. As the world today grapples with rising global temperatures and the massive, unsustainable energy costs of artificial air conditioning, architects globally are realizing they have to look backward in order to move forward. The ancient Thai builders, utilizing passive cooling, elevated floors, fluid dynamics, and thermal stratification, had successfully engineered zero-energy climate control centuries ago. While the buildings of our future might look very modern on the outside, wrapped in glass and steel, their structural DNA may need to heavily rely on the ancient, stilted wisdom of the Ruan Thai. Thank you for listening. History Maps. Learn history visually.